Hi, this is Professor Lushin. I'm going to try to provide a very quick tutorial of how to set up your Excel lab data results. I'm going to give an example of a couple ways you can do it, but I first need to review content from earlier lectures, specifically the one that lecture 6. So because this is lecture 7, I always do that wrong. And then you're going to write a memo based on the results of your data. And everybody should have different data. That's the key to this, because I want you to be able to speak to your own. We're going to have a discussion for lecture 8 on how to properly write a memo. It's going to be part of the discussion we have on Thursday, the broadcast, and I'm going to cover it a little bit in the live broadcast for lecture 9, but then in lecture 9 I want to get more into OSHA recordability and do some things with you. So again, we're going to refer to some things about. I'm going to show you how to create your data set, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what I expect for the memo. We covered in lecture 6 OSHA record keeping and how we take that data and use it to generate something called the incidence rate, which is the number of recordables per 100 full-time equivalency. And as you can see, I've got the equation on the bottom. The 200,000, which is a constant, represents 100 workers working 1 full year, 2,000 hours. 100 times 2,000, 200,000. And then you enter the number of employee hours worked, and you get that rate. And if you want to do the total case incidence rate, then you add up the columns H, I, and J. Wait, is that what it is? H, I, and J? Yeah, H, I, and J. H is days away. I is restricted transfer. J is other recordable. And that's the primary statistic from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they break it down by industry, which is the NAICS, North American Industrial Classification System. And I off the top of my head, I got them right. Total case HIJ, lost work days just H, days away restrict. We usually use DART. The DART rate is fairly commonly used. That's columns H and I. I consider that the lost time incidence rate, because if you have to stay home and recover, that's the days away case. That's H. I is when the doctor gives you a restriction that you can only stand for so long or lift so much or whatever it might be. You're not able to, or you're asked not to, do your original job as assigned. That's basically what a restricted or transfer injury case represents, and I consider that lost time. Because I mean, if they complained enough to the doctor would probably say you could stay home. But we should be out speaking with the doctors, making sure that the worker could come back to work with restrictions, and we can give them something to do. That way, it doesn't become a lost. Therefore, it doesn't qualify as a day away, which is the worst case, but I still lump those two together. Finally, we got the other recordable. Anything about first aid, column J. Yes, that's about it. Here is the OSHA 300 log, or OSHA's Form 300 log of work-related injury and illnesses. And then you can see the columns, H, I, and J. So each case gets a checkbox in one of the 4. Hopefully it's not death, but H, I, or J. If the worker receives first aid and goes back to work, you don't record it. But if they receive treatment beyond first aid, then it gets the J. If the doctor gives them a restriction, it's I. If the doctor says they should stay home and recover, even if it's a day that they aren't scheduled to work, it's an H. And then if they die, it's obviously G. And I want to call attention back to column F, which asks for way too much information in order to do analysis. F should be broken out into separate categories. So there should be one for the illness, describe the injury and illness, should be one for the body part affected, and then one should be for the substance or object. It should be broken. You shouldn't have multiple important pieces of information like that. Everything else, pretty self-explanatory. So we've got multiple things going on here. And that is that we should be analyzing when someone gets hurt, doing an effective accident investigation or incident investigation, whatever you want to call it. We talked about root cause analysis. That goes a lot deeper. towards finding why something happened versus just what. The OSHA record keeping really just focuses on the what. Doesn't really get into what corrective actions were taken, who's responsible for it, and then tracking to see if it was effective. It should, but that's a fault of OSHA's record keeping standard. So we're not going to do the in-class exercise here. This is something we'll do live together. Yeah. I want to refer back to the severity pyramids. I think that's probably the accident ratio. Okay, you could call it that too. I'm not sure that's the proper term that Bird used, but it's a ratio of the occurrence of severity. So Heinrich had pointed out that for every 330 exposures, 300 are no injury, 29 are minor, 1 major. Now that you understand how the OSHA record keeping 300 form is, the 1 is a days away or restricted transfer. So the 1 is either a checkbox in H or an I. It's not both. It's one or the other. The minor are the J's, something that required more than first aid. All the no injury incidents, that's everything else. Right off the bat, we see that the OSHA record keeping standard is only going to capture 30 out of 330, or less than 10%. Or is it about 10%? Right around 10%. That's all it's trying to point out. So 90% of what would help us prioritize and better understand what's causing injuries is being ignored if you follow just the OSHA record keeping standard. Bird, on the other hand, Frank Bird, he had for every 1 checkbox in either H or I, you'll have 10 J's. But if you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics incidence rates and compare the no lost time to lost time ratio, it's 1-to-1. So we are, even when we follow OSHA's record keeping standard, we're underreporting. We're only capturing maybe 1% of what's really going on, if you want to look at it that way, based on Bird. Definitely read the articles that I've posted for you. They get into injury ratios and the pyramid power. I really like Revitt's paper. It really breaks down what I'm talking about. So definitely read those. That'll help with your writing of the memo. You'll be able to refer to literature. The hazard control of hierarchy of controls, is something we want to be referring to and understand for this particular lab, because a roll of the dice is going to indicate what control strategy management supports. And the only way to prevent an injury from reoccurring is to eliminate the exposure to it. So either you eliminate the hazard or you eliminate the exposure. If you're using engineering controls, for the most part it's good, but could workers still work around it? Is there a failure point? Likely. Or use administrative controls, or use personal protective equipment. All these things still allow an exposure to occur, maybe at a lesser frequency, or maybe controlling what the potential severity outcome could be, but they're still exposures. And the odds aren't as high as, say, playing the lottery. According to Bird and Heinrich, they're saying that for every 600 or for every 300 exposures, there's going to be something that's recordable. It's better to attempt to control or eliminate the exposures. And so the lower on the hierarchy you go, the more likely that things are still going to remain the same. Or maybe even get worse. It's possible they could get worse, because there's chance. There's chance on whether an exposure results in something really severe or not. And something that seems really minor could be really bad. I mean, people slip on the floor and hit their head hard and suffer traumatic brain injury, and they have a lifelong disability. Whereas most people slip or trip on the floor and they just, they dust themselves off and keep going. So if we were in class, we'd be discussing some videos. You see I've got pictures here on the screen of people using ladders unsafely. with all the, I mean, other than the person who's hanging on to the gutter, these people probably completed the task as they had wanted to get it done and did not fall or get injured. Hard to believe, right? That doing something this risky doesn't result in injury, but that's the nature of safety. There is randomization, there is luck, which is why I'm doing a dice, generated a dice generating numbers for whether somebody gets hurt or not and what happens. So I want you to gain an appreciation for the idea of likelihood and severity. And I talked about using the hierarchy of controls. That the first 100 rolls of the die indicate exposures. It's numbers from 1 to 20. And then you're going to roll a 6-sided die to represent what management chose to do. So it's kind of out of your control. What you're basically doing is you're going to write a memo based on what the pre-control or pre-institution, pre-decision by management's injuries were, and then post. And if they got a lot better, I want you to convince them to continue down that road and push more higher up the hierarchy. If they chose the lowest level and things got a little bit better, you need to be able to explain to them that this was completely luck, that we need to eliminate exposures to prevent future injuries. That's really the best way to do it. If it's too much of a financial burden or too much of an investment, or we really aren't sure, we can rely on engineering controls, administrative controls, whatever it might be. But things are going to happen. People are going to get hurt, and we can do the right things, and still people might get hurt because there's still exposures. So let's move on. So the risk here on the right, risk rating. This is a risk matrix. We're going to be using risk priority numbers when we get to our Excel data analysis. So you're just writing a memo. This is not meant to be a paper. This is a memo. What you're attempting to do is get management to understand how their decision affected safety in the workplace. You want them to invest. You want them to commit to safety, and you're going to use the data to do it. We don't have any dollar values here. All we have is pre and post numbers. Pre-institution of the controls, which you roll a die, so it's random, and post. And you're going to compare the difference between the two, and then you're going to use the literature to convince management. We want to move them up the hierarchy. We got to explain what that means. I think that's basically it. If you've never written a memo, I've provided some samples. You can look online to see what the forms look like. You need to find a way to present the results in a way they understand it and use it in your argument. That's what it's all about. So please, I hope you get your data all collected before we meet on Thursday. That would be very helpful. Let's go to the website. So here we are in Lecture 7. You should have either watched or participated on Tuesday's Lecture 6. Here's the PowerPoint just covered. Here's the instructions for the lab. If we were in class, I'd be handing out bags of dice. And we would be rolling dice and filling out the Excel form. And then I've got information about the lab. So this is almost twofold. One is to understand the randomness or the chance involved with the solutions we choose in safety. And being able to convince management that just because we invested money and things didn't get better, we did reduce exposures. Eventually, the odds will even out and things will get better. And if we do nothing and things get better, it's pure luck, and they need to understand that we just got lucky. So that's the assignment. So this is under Lecture 8. Here's a memo. So to top management from you, give a date. This is results of whatever control strategy. These are the things I want you to talk about, but don't have it in a bulleted list. Right. This is an example of a table. This is the simplest presentation of the data itself. Pre-strategy, post-strategy, the difference and the change percentage. and then refer to some of the models and forms, and we'll talk about that on Thursday. So let's bring up the, let's first, here are the papers I want you to read. If you actually want to roll a dice individually, you can do that. I've got 2 Dungeons and Dragons rolling sites here. But open up the Excel document. This is what I'm going to bring up next. Boop. Here it is. So the instructions are right here. To set up, this is the pre-strategy. And then the pre-strategy, this will automatically update for you. And then you're going to roll a 6-sided die for what management chooses. The solution, you'll see. There's 2 ways we can do this. First, we can go to a dice rolling site, or if you have a Dungeons and Dragons set, you could actually use that as well. So here, I'm going to be rolling a 20-sided die. So if I click here, it rolls a 6. Click it again, rolls a 17, a 7, a 10, an 18. What I would do then is go and enter them into here. There's another way we can do this, though. I searched and found out that Microsoft Excel has the ability to randomly generate numbers. And so if I type equal, whenever you type equal into a cell, Excel itself, it assumes that you're going to enter now a word or a code in order to do a function, or you're going to add numbers or subtract numbers. So what I want to enter is rand for random, and then between. So RANDBETWEEN, and then parentheses, and it says bottom and top. So the lowest number in a 20-sided die is 1. Oh, I got to put a comma. The highest is 20. Hit return, and it randomly generated that number. I could click and drag this, but I also know that if I put the cursor over the bottom right corner, hopefully you can see that, and I double click, it'll just fill in everything below all the way to the bottom, and it should stop at the bottom. It did. You'll learn this stuff later. So my pre-strategy results. So out of 100 exposures, there were no concern out of 34. So those didn't result in anything. The worker didn't even realize they were at risk. 23 of them, almost a quarter of them, the worker felt that, whoa, that was close. Nothing happened, but so we're already at 57. 57 of the 100 exposures, no injury. 11 of them were first aid, so those didn't get recorded. So now we're at 68. Two-thirds of the potentially dangerous exposures or risky exposures are not recordable. Do you see what I mean by that? And I mean, that's actually a low number compared to what Bird and Heinrich had told us. Other recordable, I had 16. Restricted transfer cases were 11, and I had 5 cases with days lost. Interesting, right? So then we got the 6-sided die. If I was on this site, I would click on the 6-sided die, and it gave me a 4. I could enter a 4, I suppose. So if I go and enter a 4, hit return. The solution selected by management, I got to go to tab 4, but they chose to do behavioral-based safety and job hazard analyses. That's level 4 out of 6. So let's go to tab 4. My new thing is that there were, post-implementation, there were 26 of no concern, 25 near miss, 24 first aid. So we're already at 75. So there is a reduction there. These are things that would not have been recorded. We now have 11 other recordables, 8 and 6. What was it previously? So 11, 8, and 6. It was previously 15, 6, and 14? It wasn't that before. I think every time we do something, it re-rolls. So you got to be careful. It probably already changed it. Did it? I think when I added that, it changed it. That's the problem with the rand between, is it keeps doing it. Looks like it hasn't changed it now. So I went from 14 days lost to 6. I went from 6 restricted to 8, so that went up a little bit. And I went from 15 to 11. So less lost days. So there was some success here. But what I'd want to do is now create my table, as I had shown you in the on the memo here. And figure out what the changes are and then write it up. So what if we took tab 1, which is blame the worker and punish them? So my days lost went from 14 to 20. My restrictive transfer went from 6 to 15. My other recordable went from 15 to 14. That sounds about right. There's more injury hiding, things like that. What if we had gotten a 2? 2 is retraining the workers. So it's indirect blaming. The numbers did get worse again. Or wait, did they stay the same? So 15, 6, 14. It stayed the same, exactly the same. For tab 3, it stayed the same too. I shouldn't have done that. Administrative controls, it got better for tab 4, tab 5, and then tab 6. As you can see, 0 lost time. Yeah, this is the best, for sure. So I got the top here listed. So I want you to, it's probably easier to write this up with a tab 1 or tab 2 because you're not going to have any change. It's easier. You're going to have a little bit of change with 3 and 4, and 5 and 6 should have the biggest improvement, but still you need to convince management that it's the proper thing to do. So not a lot of work to do here, especially with the equal rand between parentheses 1 comma 20. If you're comfortable with Excel. If not, go to the website and go ahead and generate and type in the numbers. Then they won't change on you. So that's one way to do it. Unless you got dice, you can just do it. Roll them, fill it in. So that's all you have to do. 100 rolls and enter it here on the begin here. And then roll a 6-sided die and put in the number and then go to the tab that it indicates. And then you'll see, what the management strategy was. Again, for tab 4, it was implement behavioral-based safety observations and job hazard analyses and attempt to better understand causes and make better corrections. That's, and I just built in some algorithms to come up with these numbers based on Heinrich and Bird. I think that's all I really need you to do is to fill in the original roll the die. And then it generates a change for you. And then you just have to fill in the Word document and calculate the differences and the percent changes. I hope you know how to do that. I think with the example, you should be able to see that. And then start thinking about how you're going to gently and suggestively and positively let management know what their strategy did, how a hazard control hierarchy attempts or demonstrates that if you can eliminate exposure, there'll be no more injuries. Otherwise, there's exposures and the range of outcomes, the severity of outcomes is going to vary. It's going to be random. There's going to be chance involved. That's why it's best just to eliminate the exposure. And then refer to Rebit and Heinrich's papers and some of the main themes from those papers to convince them that this is the right thing to do. This is what the numbers will do in the future. And that's how things will get better. Appeal to their ego, appeal to their better side. Don't tell them, and we'll talk about how to write a memo. I'm going too long here. 23 minutes was too long. Please get this done before Thursday. So then you can bring your data. We can talk about it. But like I said, this isn't due, I don't think, until I thought it was October 4th, but I need it to come up here quick. When is the paper due? It's going to flip down on me anyway. Of course. The due date should have been posted. Keeps moving on me. All right, so I need to post that there. I don't know why I'm doing this live. This is kind of embarrassing. I got to go to assignments. So module and paper is due October 4th. So you've got plenty of time, but don't wait till the end. This should not take long. This is, I have the data. I'm going to look at the papers or the papers posted. What was the main theme? Tell management, pre-strategy, this is what was going on. You chose this. This was the result. Explain the hazard control hierarchy and the randomness and ratios and things like that. And that the best way to prevent future injuries is elimination. So more investment, you'll get more of an assured outcome, even though there is randomness. So that's all I got. Ask me questions if you got them. Otherwise, we will talk about this on Thursday.